Hey guys, welcome to another 5 RPG reviews, games that I need to talk about. Today we've got 2 JRPGs, 2 indie RPGs, and as always, one surprise at the end. So let's begin. Let's start with Fallen Legion Revenant. This is a sequel to a game I covered in the previous episode, also available on the same PS5 collection. It was also released on PS4, Switch and Windows. However, this isn't a direct sequel. You don't need to play the other game to understand this, as it's got a self-contained story. Even though Cecile, the main character of the first one, for no reason is now an exemplar, and with the story now embodies a post-apocalyptic world where some kind of miasma is either killing people or turning them into monsters. A large group of survivors live contained in a prison manor ruled by an evil warden that the main characters want to overthrow. So the plot follows Rowena, who's basically a revenant, a ghost, trying to rescue her son imprisoned by the warden I mentioned. But it also follows Lucien, a noble who assists Rowena inside the manor. Lucien's gameplay will basically be about talking to other survivors or council members to make decisions that will affect the story, the roots, and the endings. Some endings can be achieved early in the game actually. Lucien makes conniving and political ploys that might greatly affect other survivors, so it can get pretty dark sometimes. As for Rowena, well, the thing is, nobody can see her since she's dead, so she can go into the overworld to try to find clues on how to defeat the warden, but she also has to fight monsters. So her gameplay will basically be like in the first game, going from one group of monsters to another in a 2D visual style. Combat is the same as before. You can have up to 3 warriors, known as exemplars, each controlled by one button. The Valkyrie profile action points bar is back, even for Rowena, who acts as the healer, but can also use attack spells. A new feature is that you can move your whole party from left to right, and Rowena's spells can also move a specific enemy to a far or a closer grid, so combat is more strategic here, but as a result, a bit more stressful. The quick decisions you needed to make in the first game to get buffs or debuffs or alter story outcomes are gone. Now you've got some chests that you need to open with an attack to get a buff or debuff. Bosses are also back, and you can once again break their shields after enough attacks or death blows, which are an exemplar's special skill. But to use Rowena's spells or any death blow, you need to have at least 1 point in the action points bar. All good here, good, engaging and chaotic combat. Once again with a great soundtrack, but not as memorable as in the first game. Back to Lucien, we have one fatal flaw to discuss here. Occasionally, very occasionally actually, you'll have a limited amount of time to make decisions, persuade council members or survivors in a specific topic, perform stealth missions, and solve puzzles. This timer unfortunately ruins everything! It may lock you into a certain character's death just because you didn't decide in time what to do, but it also may lead you to a game over where it might affect the bosses Rowena fights in their favor. It's just way too stressful because it goes down so damn quickly. And the worst of it all, solving annoying and difficult puzzles with a timer sucks ass. So yeah, this can put you in a foul mood and rage quit. I was honestly ready to come here and say that this sequel was superior to its predecessor in almost every area, but the timer annihilates that argument entirely. It's still a good game worth playing, especially since it's already there if you buy this PS5 version, or you know what, it's often for laughable prices digital on all platforms. But yeah man, I expect most of you will rage quit at some point or simply look up a guide to beat it. Next is Persona 5 Tactica. This is yet another Persona 5 spin-off. At this point, I think Persona 5 has become its own series. It's like they need to try every single genre to feel satisfied. So now they went into the strategy RPG route, just not your average out-of-the-mill tactics game. Instead, they took inspiration from the Mario plus Rabbids crossovers, which are inspired by the XCOM series. The story follows the cast of Persona 5 suddenly appearing in a bizarre metaverse unlike anything they've seen before. Soon, they learn that there's a few kingdoms they need to go through to get back home. It's in the first kingdom where they meet Erina, who's been fighting in an uprising against a tyrannical leader, and the new protagonist of this game, Toshiro, a soon-to-be Prime Minister of Japan who's trapped in this metaverse that seems to exist based on his own cognition. I'm honestly surprised about this plot. It took me a while to take it seriously, mostly because of the character art style and their semi-chibi appearances. But in the end, it was the classic Persona 5 plot of fighting oppressive tyrants who abuse their power to crush the citizens. I'm a sucker for these types of narratives, but coming from an Atlus Games nowadays is contradicting to say the least, considering their political censorship in recent games. However, this type of plot is something we already saw in previous Persona 5 spin-offs, especially in the main game. In other words, while still well written, it's a recycled plot. Gameplay-wise, you will have a menu-based base of operations in a fictional version of Café LeBlanc. Here you can watch a couple of optional scenes with your allies. You might want to do that because you get rewarded by GP, which are points you'll use to unlock new battle and passive abilities for your characters. Yep, this game has a skill tree, and it's alright, thankfully, nothing convoluted. You can also use the shop to buy new guns for your characters, but as always, they're ridiculously expensive. Thankfully, you can also use personas to fuse them into new weapons. Oh yeah, you can also use the classic Persona Fusion feature in the Velvet Room with Lavenza. My problem is that during battle, these personas can't be summoned. With the exception of Erina, everyone, not just the protagonist, can equip up to one extra persona apart from their native one. But they only serve to grant you one or two abilities, that's it. I found that disappointing. I wanted to see these personas summoned and casting their spells or attacks, but instead everything is done by the native personas. The maps are simple, often with complex layouts and a variety of puzzles that get more and more difficult as you advance. In terms of difficulty, normal mode is actually quite easy, and the fact that if one of your characters, including the protagonist, gets defeated, another one can join in their place using the baton pass ability. No, you can't use it when you want to. Someone has to be defeated for you to use it. Only 3 characters can participate during battle after all. The real difficulty comes from solving some puzzles and having to suffer through switches and doors with terrain-affected areas such as height. It gets pretty annoying sometimes, but like I said, the maps are still fun and most of the time they're quick to end. Basically, you use any block type of object to hide behind, some offering total immunity if an enemy attacks you from the front. But the point of most battles is to defeat enemies by using one attack to get them out of their hiding spot, and then use another attack, ranged, melee, or a persona skill to trigger a critical, which grants the attacker an extra turn. The enemies can also use and abuse this mechanic on you, by the way. And as you've been seeing, characters move on grids, but they have limited areas to do so. It's a fun combat, I'll admit, never hard to understand or get used to. All-out attacks are available, but you need to get the enemy or enemies in a triangular position like this one to trigger it. You also need to have enough voltage, which increases the more you attack or receive damage. It's pretty fun. The music is by far the best part of this game, surprisingly not composed by Shoji Meguro. Instead, it's done by Toshiki Konishi, who co-composed the music in Devil Survivor 2, Strange Journey, and SMT4. Overall, this is a good game, fun, quite short. Main story alone can be done in like 25 hours. I do recommend it, especially now that its price has dropped considerably. Moving on to Children of Morta. Developed by American studio Deadmage, this is an indie action RPG on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. You play as the Bergson family, a cast of characters in charge of protecting the fictional Mount Morta. Now that something evil called the Corruption threatens the Mount and all living species, they have to take up arms. The game has beautiful visuals with extremely well-crafted details in every corner. You always start in their house within this overview and you can see what the family members are doing. Sometimes you'll be able to watch a scene or two that involves one of them. This is how they slowly start joining you, as you only start with the father and his eldest daughter. Later you unlock the younger brother, who's basically a thief, and so on. This is basically a roguelike game. You can only play as one character whenever you go into the dungeon with randomly generated areas. Sometimes you'll have a temporary party member, but it'll be just for a very short area within a totally random side quest. I think having permanent party members would have been a great idea, but they wasted it. They did add a couch cooperative mode though for 2 players. Anyway, you won't be able to switch between characters once you've entered the dungeon. These include a variety of monsters that will come rushing at you once they notice you. Often you'll find yourself fighting against hordes of them. It's a really challenging game, and since it's a roguelike, you know the drill. Dying over and over and over again while carrying over gain stats and abilities. Every time you level up, you get 1 skill point to unlock something in a character's tree. Some skills are shared amongst the entire family, others are individual. But it doesn't change the fact that you gotta re-enter the dungeons from the first floor and fight your way through again, so it's a repetitive hell like any RPG of this kind. There will also be puzzles here and there, most of them have to be done to get a treasure or a temporary skill. Maybe a healing potion for example, since they're extremely scarce and cannot be acquired by any other means. Controls during combat and exploration are fantastic though, and it feels satisfactory to kill enemies or bosses. Music is alright, nothing outstanding, it's just there and some themes are slightly memorable. Like the dungeon theme, since you'll be hearing it again and again and again. Listen, this isn't my type of game, let alone the punishing nature of roguelikes. It's just repeating the same dungeon or area from the beginning every time you die. It gets tedious and boring real quick. I made it to the point where I unlocked a 4th family member and then I quit. I could only seem to do well with the father while sucking with anybody else. It's just not for me. However, those who are into these types of games will surely have a blast, as I see nothing objectively wrong with it. But you know, there's one roguelike I did like. And that is Card's RPG, the Misty Battlefield. It should have been called just the Misty Battlefield. Card's RPG is the most generic name ever. Anyway, this is a strategy RPG developed by Acquire, creators of the Octopath Traveler games and Akiba's Trip. After leaving Square Enix, they were purchased by Kadokawa Games. But this is a small, digital-only RPG they developed pretty much independently. There is a physical version, but only in Japan. You play as a group of mercenaries led by the curvy Valdina and, Serenoa from Triangle Strategy? Seriously, they look almost the same! Was his design intentional? Anyway, they're sent on a mission to put a stop to bizarre experiments where someone evil is turning people into horrible chimeras. So it's a dark fantasy RPG. But the story is just kinda there. It's well written, but it's bare bones. It's 95% gameplay, 5% story unfortunately, and there's close to 0 character development. Characters are still interesting though, but it includes a couple that will surely make a lot of people frown, especially nowadays. Anyway, the game also has roguelike elements. This is how it works. You get some very small chit chat every now and then this menu appears. Here you can choose the units that will participate in battle. Maps are cleverly laid out to encourage exploration. You move on grids and you have to spend a turn to walk towards an enemy or to a treasure chest, which contains healing items or equipment. Sadly, for some stupid reason, you can't trade equipment. If a character gets something that will be better equipped on someone else, you won't be able to give it to them. Now, you can also find in the map these spots to either acquire a new card or discard one. Since you only have a limit of 50 cards among the party, yeah, that's right, as its title implies, this is a card-based system. Making contact with an enemy will lead to this 2D screen. You will have 3 turns here, and on each you'll have up to 3 action points. More if you get cards that can increase them. Using cards cost action points, of course, some 1, some 2, some 3. So you need to balance your strategies and use the ones you see fit. Cards can be attack cards or spells, buffs, debuffs, healing, etc. Thankfully the enemy only has 1 action per turn instead of 3. Regardless, the game's stupidly, and I mean stupidly hard. You see, instead of leveling up, your characters gain stat increases after gaining enough experience, which is called voltage here. Like Persona 5 Tactica, huh? But once the mission ends, like in a roguelike RPG, everyone loses those stats and levels. The only one that levels up is you! As the strategist, every time a mission ends, you'll get experience and 1 skill point per level gained. You have a skill tree that allows you to unlock or upgrade stats, or even some of the main characters. These stats are shared amongst the party, so even if you got a game over in a mission, you will still retain these strategist stats. There is no permadeath here whatsoever, and you only get a game over if your entire party dies. There's an easy mode, but it's ridiculously easy. After a couple of hours, I played the game on easy for a long time, until I felt I was good enough for the final maps, so I changed back to normal. Anyway, this is a pretty good but straightforward, linear game. Music by Noriyuki Iwadare is alright, but nothing sticks with you. The art style is beautiful and the visuals are nice, but the in-game graphics are a bit low budget. However, I found the battle mechanics to be incredibly addicting and they pretty much made the entire game for me. So despite its mediocre feats in some areas, and its questionable localization, the combat alone was worth my time. Main story can be completed in about 10 hours or so. Finally, Yakuza Kiwami. This is a full remake of the very first Yakuza ever made, which was originally released on the PS2. There are several games in this series, and they all have strong RPG elements. But are they really RPGs? I'm not sure yet. So you play as Kazuma Kiryu, who is a goody two-shoes Yakuza, going to collect debts and stuff like that. One day his clan leader is murdered by his best friend, but since he has a very sick sister in the hospital, Kazuma takes the blame for him and goes to jail. 10 years later, when he gets out, things have drastically changed. There's a clan war about to explode, corruption involved, and his friend has a dark agenda now. Anyway, this is a mini open world. You'll play the entirety of the game in the very small town of Kamurocho, pretty much infested with criminals and lowlifes. Some of those will often try to attack you if they see you, so if you aren't fast enough to run away, you'll get caught in a battle. This is a beat 'em up. Sometimes you'll have an ally, but most of the times Kazuma will fight by himself with his fists. But of course, as in any other game in the series, you can pick up nearby objects to serve as temporary weapons. Now, Kazuma has 4 styles of combat and different moves on each. I found myself comfortable with the regular brawler style for these normal enemies. You can change styles at any time, but remember, each has advantages and disadvantages. Actually, the point of this combat is to try and find the best one for each boss fight out there. It has difficulty settings, but on normal mode, the bosses can be extremely, and I mean extremely cheap, frustrating and annoying. I only won and never got a game over because I was always stocked on healing items. And yeah, in this remake, you'll fight this dumbass Majima quite regularly. It's okay because you get points and money after his battles, or in any other battle in the game actually, that you'll be able to distribute in passive abilities for each of Kazuma's fighting styles or new moves. You can also equip some breakable weapons and pull them out of the middle of a fight, but yeah, they break, remember that. Though you can repair them in a shop. Speaking about shops, around town they will be available, such as pharmacies where you can buy healing items, weapon stores, pawn stores, restaurants where you can heal and also gain experience, etc. Minigames are also out there. This is a really good game. Not the best controls during combat, but far better than in the original PS2 version. Amazing Japanese dub, dark, mature and intriguing storytelling with some heartbreaking moments involved and tons of plot twists. The shit Kazuma goes through in this game, man. Unbelievable. This is available on PS4, Xbox One and PC. A short one, stick to the main story and you'll do between 13 and 15 hours total. Yes, it's got a crap ton of side quests, actually. And the music, oh my god, it's awesome! So, is it an RPG, or an action RPG at least? Due to the variety of strong RPG elements, I'd say maybe leaning to yes, but at the same time not really. What do you think? You know what? What matters is that the game's freaking great. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!